um, prompted on Malachi,
Not to.
so we'll go straight to the Hebrew.
Okay.
Good?
I'll make it.
Malachi 2:17 brings up
Thank you.
a comment about how the people have wearied Yahweh. So your translation may say the Lord, but there's the divine name.
Not on your face, huh?
You have wearied Yahweh with your words. That's interesting. So this would be the prophet, I guess, speaking. How do you open? um, word in the Hebrew, Debri, the 10 Commandments is the 10 words, Debir. And the question is, Bama. In what way? Doesn't that sound like a great question word, Bama? It's almost like manna. How have we wearied him? In that you say, everyone who does evil, ra, is good. The word tov. What is he tov? I always, little inside baseball here. Because, some Jewish men wear their kippah. I have a natural one for me. And usually those people, that's kind of almost sound derogatory, those observant Jewish people know their Hebrew, and so I'm always prone to say, if I see a man wearing a kippah, I say Yom Tov, which means good day. And they always look at me like, are you messing with me? Why did you do that? I was like, yeah, I know those two words, Yom Tov, have a good day. And there's the word Tov. Okay, so the thing that is wearisome is that they say that everyone who does evil is good in the sight of Yahweh, and that, or that he delights in them. Where is the God of justice, they ask? Hamishpat, down there at the bottom here. Where is he? And then equally so, we read in Malachi 3 that you said it's useless to serve God. What profit is it that we have kept his ordinance and we've walked as mourners before the Lord? So now we call the proud blessed. For those who do wickedness are raised up. They even tempt God and go free. So those are two accusations about how God deals with people. And when a people get aggravated, frustrated, thinking that they're doing what they're called to do and they don't see any benefit out of it, in fact, they look around and see people who are flaunting their disobedience before God. They're the ones who are being prosperous. So, two references to this, and I wanted to get your help to talk about this topic. When we first started Malachi, it starts off saying that God loves them. And they say, well, how have you loved us? And so we actually spent a whole Lord's Day talking about love. What is love? And how important love is and how popular love is. But I did want to take a Sunday to talk about morality. Now, I don't want to be known as a moralist. I know my own personal morality. I am constantly ashamed of the things I think, say, and do based on my morality that I possess. I will say things, and then I have a very good wife who says, "You said what?" I said, "Well, don't you know that does not look good? You can't say those types of things to people." It's like, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't be saying those things. And not because of her promptings necessarily, but because the Bible has some dictates about how we're supposed to live and interact with people, what our relationship should look like. We did read that passage from Matthew that said that God is keeping track of every idle word, and every man will have to give an account for every idle word they have spoken. So even the pagans have a book of remembrance, and God's going to go into action against their sin. But Christianity, in a lot of contexts, has been identified as the goody two shoes religion, that you just put down people who want to have fun, and you preach the commandments of God, of course, because if you preach those things, hopefully people respond and live according to the truth. But the truth is, just preaching the law doesn't save anyone unless you give them Christ. And I don't think we're ever going to have a society that's probably completely moral unless they love Jesus, unless they really love that man and what kind of life he lived. I want it to be more than just an appreciation for a great leader or a great teacher. I want them to really love Jesus. And those, I think, who love Jesus care about having a particular morality. But morality is such a big, unwieldy topic. Oh my goodness, I forgot something in my office. So I'm going to have to run and get it. Unless, Steph, could you get something for me? I printed 2 pieces of paper on Pat's desk. They're just sitting there on the desk. If I forgot to bring it, you go through my office door to get it. So those two verses in Malachi, talking about what is right and righteous and how we should feel about righteousness, and how can we tell the wicked from those who are not wicked. God says there's going to be a day when all of our moral decisions are going to be exposed, and he's going to judge them all. And I am just saying, in the 40 years of being involved in public ministry, from my earliest days as a young youth leader to seeing what society is doing today, I could say that has progressively gotten worse. And it's a measurement of our moral fiber. It's a measurement of our of where we are as a people. So I just have been burdened with it, and I feel like I should do the work and try and just do a proper presentation of morality without sounding like a moralist, with presenting Jesus Christ as the only Savior of people who don't have a perfect morality. I need Jesus' salvation, because I, as a Christian, see all my deficiencies constantly. And I just wanted to talk to you guys about some of the things I was thinking. And you got, yeah.
Yeah.
I need a pen
to
too. Yeah, go
Okay.
jump in.
Jump in. I have talked repeatedly with a member of my family, and I'm sure you know who it is. Let's see. About there's fun and then there's fun. Okay? So you can have fun in a way that is pleasing to God, that shows that you are enjoying His creation, that you're enjoying the people that He has put in your life, or you can kind of have the kind of fun that leads to dissipation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think that when non-Christians criticize us, like we don't want anybody to have any fun,
yeah,
that would be my answer. There's fun and then there's fun. Okay. It depends on how you're looking at fun, right?
Yeah.
Because you can have fun in a moral way that honors God, that uplifts the other people around you, and you can still enjoy yourself, right? But then there's the kind of fun that leads to like everybody getting wasted
Yeah.
and, you know, throwing up all over the place. And do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, you're actually sort of pinging off the sides of where I want to go in the fact that there calibration needs to be made. And that opens the door to a bigger topic about how you fine tune morality. And so so I just did something very immoral. Someone gave me a pen to use and I broke it. No, it works. It works. I just can't believe I just fidgeted with it. And so the moral thing to do right now is to say, I apologize. I was not thinking about the preciousness of this pen and the people to whom gave it to me. What was I saying? Okay, so I was reading a little Lewis today, a little Schaeffer today, a little Hooker today, Richard Hooker, Puritan writer. And morality eventually has to be displayed by a group of people. So I went to a standard definition, and this one's the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. So there's a philosophical category for morality. And someone posted a cartoon the other day of a cartoon character with a super pleasant face, and on the bottom the caption was thinking about philosophy. And then the next template, what do you call the next frame? Was a person with a scowl and just very frustrated, and then it said, having to write a paper about philosophy. It's like, I like thinking about the topic, but man, when it comes down to really putting words to it and getting it organized, it's just a beast. But we all know that in our society, so many things are going wrong that we've lost something morally. And we would say as Christians, well, we've lost the lordship of Jesus Christ and his kingship. And then, of course, I think we've had this discussion together. There's probably never really been a super ideal time in America's history when everyone was moral, except for today in 1607 when they got off the boat at Cape Henry and said their first prayer. You know, that was about probably the most holy America has ever been. Ever since then, it's gone downhill. So back to a definition of morality. The Stanford folks thinks there does not seem to be much reason to think that a single definition of morality will be applicable to all moral discussions. See, that's a big beast then. One reason for this is that morality seems to be used in two distinct broad senses, a descriptive sense and a normative sense. More particularly, the term morality can be used either, one, descriptively to refer to certain codes of conduct put forward by a society or a group, such as a religion, or accepted by an individual for her own behavior. I've noticed that in a lot of philosophy works. It's never him. It's always a girl. I don't know why they always do that.
Trying to be inclusive.
Yeah. So there's one sense in which morality can be used, and I think that's how most people think. It's the code of conduct. Keep to the code. Or two, normatively, to refer to a code of conduct that, given specified conditions, would be put forward by all rational people. And, did I look up the verse in Romans chapter 2, which talks about that even the Gentiles know.
Because God is blood.
Yeah, their very conscience speaks to them about what's right and what's wrong. And then, of course, I wanted to make sure that the word moral was in the Bible. It's not really even a Bible word, morality. The Hebrew people had their laws. civil ceremonial, and that was supposed to give them their code. That was their code of conduct. But I found this one verse in the New King James, Second Chronicles. Why did I do this? Second Chronicles 28. There it is, 28, verse 19. For the Lord brought Judah low because of Ahaz, king of Israel, for he had encouraged moral decline in Judah and had been continually unfaithful to the Lord. New King James uses the word moral. That's the only usage of the word moral in the New King James. But we're familiar with Israel's history, in this particular case, Judah, the southern kingdom of Judah. As the king goes, the country goes. You can kind of say that about a lot of countries right now. If we look at the landscape, we see crime unabated, increasing. We're seeing all kinds of measurements of crime, from the border to Walmart. I mean, there's lack of respect for authority, for property. It seems like a lot of things are going wrong, and we want to know why the code of our common culture is allowing all of these things to take place. So is it because we don't have enough policemen? Or is it because of some moral deficiency in our people? I do want you guys to start speaking up, because I don't have an organized presentation. What I'm going to do in a few moments is just read to you a bunch of thoughts that I have about morality. But
I would like to put forth the premise that
Good.
our country has become very narcissistic. I mean, a lot of people in society have become that way, and it's all about me and what I want, okay? So I can step on your rights because I feel that is good for me, right? Okay, so for example, when I was a little girl, no one would swear in front of a child.
Yeah.
Even the most, I would say like a sailor off the boat, right?
Yeah, right.
They would not even dream of swearing in front of a young child, right? But today, all you have to do is walk down the street and somebody's, I can remember this distinctly because my family, lived in Australia for when I was 12 years old. We took a trip. We lived in Perth on the West Coast. We took a trip to Ayers Rock, and we were going to go to it. We were staying at a hotel, and we were out in the town there, nearest to Ayers Rock, and I should say Uhuru.
Yeah, that's got a new name. Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, but there was a drunk Aboriginal woman, swearing at the top of her lungs, right?
Yeah.
And it floored me because I had never, at 12 years old, I had never heard that kind of language before, ever,
Yeah.
Did not even dream that it existed, kind of thing, okay? So our society as a whole agreed that using profanity in front of, young children was not appropriate, okay? But now,
Okay, let me play with
go to
you.
Walmart.
Let me play with you a moment.
Okay.
You're immoral for judging that lady's culture.
Well, like I'm saying, she was as drunk as she could be.
Yeah.
So.
Well, see,
other than falling down.
It brings up the matter that I think Seneca brought up so many thousands of years ago. He said, morality can't be one thing in Corinth and another thing in Rome. It has to be consistent.
Right.
Otherwise, it's not a code. It's not a code anymore.
Uh-huh.
So, but you know how many people, educated people, will say, who are you to judge that culture? That's the way they manifest their form of love for one another. You know, I doubt it.
Really?
It tells to me that an indigenous
Especially
person
being
got too much strong
Drunk in
drink.
the
Yeah,
middle of the day and swearing at the top of your
right.
lungs. Yeah.
But this morality discussion even broaches these types of comments. No one, but I agree with your initial premise, which I like very much.
Mhm.
It's very narcissistic. You become the measure of all things. And when I think about my sinful proclivities, it's always because I'm thinking about myself first. When I'll go through the day and be embarrassed of something I said or neglected to say, and I'll think to myself, why didn't I even bring up this topic? This was important to this person. They just went through this incident, this event, and you said nothing about it because you're just thinking about all the stuff you want to do. And you didn't think about who you were with, what they told you, what they asked you to pray for, and you never.
Well, two arguments I've heard on what she's talking about, say cursing in front of the kids.
Yeah.
One, a guy told me that a pastor of his, a very famous pastor in the Memphis area who has passed away, told them it's okay because it's the language of the day. And then another argument, a guy tried to tell me is, well, show me in the Bible where it says those words are bad.
Right. There is certainly the passage that says there shouldn't even be a hint of immorality among you. And there is a verse that says about coarse jesting, that there shouldn't be coarse jesting. Yeah, I always thought I'd grow up and be known worldwide as the cussing pastor, just cuss at everyone, cuss at sin, cuss at the devil. I'm just making that up here. Don't believe that. I'm just. So, but I mean, there is a guy out there who is known for being the cussing pastor. Who's kind of on his own now. Okay, so I was reading through these different authors and I just came up with some ideas. I don't have any cohesion to any of this. This is just thoughts that came to my mind, but I'd like you to comment on where you believe appropriate on the topic of morality. Obviously, we have to have a definition for what it is, so it's a code of conduct. It derives from somewhere. It's based on certain principles that people find foundational to their identity. But evidently, morality is in flux. And when the majority of the people say, oh, that's old time, we don't do that anymore, then you have a new standard of morality. And anyone who tries to advocate another morality becomes the troublemaker. So, but if it is based on some type of principle, you get and this is why it's a philosophical discussion. You get to come back and say, how do you derive at that principle? That's basically the end of my message tonight. So I better not shoot that wad just yet. Okay, so first of all, there's no neutral morality. Morality always advocates one thing as being virtuous or vice. So it either advocates for total autonomy, we're starting right there, narcissism, or it advocates for total authoritarianism. But it either comes from you or from somewhere else who has the power to enforce it. And my thoughts on this, and challenge me because I want to think. I want to be like Shane. Where I'm wrong, tell me where I'm wrong so I can get to where it's right and find freedom there. But Christian morality comes from a completely authoritarian God. And the great, wonderful news about that is that this authoritarian God is a good God. And he is just and holy and true. and all the attributes that you'd
But
expect.
it's also for you.
And he's for you in
He's
Christ.
for you.
He's for his people. But the way that I've got this caricature of the things that I'm seeing on the internet and the morality that's now being proclaimed, and there's some very brave social commentators are like, no, we're not giving into this 1 inch. We're gonna stop this, and we're gonna have to fight against this, because you can't say this person is not who they say they're. You know what I'm trying to get to.
Yes.
People are pretending to be things that they're not. All right. What gives them the right to make that decision? They do, and whatever group they're with that's empowering them. So, but morality is advocating for total autonomy or someone's total authoritarianism. I got it out of there. You want to give any more to that? Yeah.
That sounds true, but it all comes down to if you look at morality as standards.
Yeah.
Let's call it that. Then where are you going to get those standards from? So it's either going to be from an authority figure like God, or whatever you think the standard should be.
Yeah.
So it really comes down to two things. Is there an objective standard, or is there a subjective standard? And that's, as Christians, we think there's an objective standard, and that's God. And then if you're a narcissist, then you think, no, I set the standards. So it's really just those two ends. And then, since we're social people, then it matters how you behave. You kind of look at to other people. So, you got to look at our leaders. Have they been upholding those standards over the years, or have they not? And so look at our political leaders, our church leaders, what's been going on in the past. And it seems to me like there has been a decline in leadership using the objective standards that we're used to from the Bible. And hence, you got people that are just following their leaders.
Well spoken, I thought.
Those kids that are all rioting in Chicago or wherever, they're following each other, and each other's behavior is what's setting the standard for them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not having a parental figure, and especially a father, who's telling them, you don't walk into Walmart and rip the place up, There's nobody there to tell them, you don't do this.
Right.
And the police, their hands are sort of tied in respect, because they're going to be accused of being, racist and this and that and the other, right? And so they're afraid to do their civic or their sworn duty, so to speak, and to protect, property, protect people.
Mm-hmm.
And so that restraint is gone too. So they have no restraint.
Mm-hmm.
They do not have a pattern of morality that's been taught to them by their elders, and they do not have a restraint in society that's holding them back, right?
Yeah.
So why not walk into Walmart and, with your bag of your trash bag and fill it up, and all your friends and everybody and just rip the place up? Why not? You're not going to get in trouble for doing it.
Especially if you have a right.
Oh,
yeah. I was going to say that goes, kind of back to both of what you were saying. But Mark talking about the subjective versus objective authority and relating that to the narcissist versus the person who has an authority in their life, like a religious person. But really, when you think about it, and I think this is like some power philosophy or whatever, the narcissist is also authoritarian. It's just they're the authority. So it goes back to, and like Anne's saying, if no authority has been put in place over these youth who have not been trained to respect an authority, the authority becomes themselves, which is the subjective version of truth and morality that Mark talked about. But even it goes back to before the garden, right? I mean, that's what Lucifer did with God. So I don't know that people are any better than the angels in that respect.
So you're supposed to find your better angels inside of you.
Except that they've been redeemed by
All
God.
my angels are fallen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got one good one on one.
Yeah,
side.
right.
You're listening to the wrong one.
But morality has to be accepted by the society, because if you have a group of people and then somebody walks in and starts doing something that's against the moral code of that
Yeah.
society, the whole group does something about it.
Yeah.
Now there's so much
Gray area.
Gray area, yeah. So much gray area, and so much afraid to do anything because you're called out as racist, misogynist, homophobic, whatever.
Xenophobic.
That you don't do anything about it, and then the rot starts to come
Yeah.
from within.
Yeah. So it seems to me that there's been, on the morality scale, I'm going way far afield of where I wanted to go. You have the first TV show that shows the first live kiss on television. It's like, whoa. The first time that the man and wife's bed is together, because they would always be in separate bed.
Ricky and Lucy.
So, there's always a first show. The first. Did you see that Beatles song, "I Want to Hold Your Hand"? No one has ever written a song like that before. That's a little provocative, actually. And then there's a big hubbub, and then there's the finger pointers, where we always expect, that's what's dangerous. And then the media makes fun of them, and then that cycle just goes every single time.
But it's going downward.
Yeah.
It's like the whirlpool that's
Right.
going downward, right?
The next question is, what's causing it? Is it just us going back to our base, our fallen nature, or is there something else like spiritual things going on that are
Spiritual balance.
causing it?
Yeah. I would say maybe both.
That's what I'm
I
wondering.
would say both.
Mm-hmm.
Because all Satan has to do to disrupt the quote plan of God is to make people think that Jesus was just a good teacher,
Right.
that sort of thing, and get them to deviate a little bit off from the
Yeah.
true gospel.
That's the
If you can
old.
get him to just deviate a little bit, he wins.
Yeah.
And so get them to deviate on what morals are, and just eat away at it just a little bit. All of a sudden, now you're a lot bit.
It's like shooting the cannon. If you're just 1 degree off, a mile away, you're just gonna miss it by a little bit. But if it shoots all far away, you're like miles off. So you just came up with my next statement. Morality needs to be substituted with another morality. So that old morality of leave it to Beaver actually kept women chained to their homes and men stuck in 9-to-5 jobs, and I don't know, they come up with it, but they'll find a moral reason for why that life was bad and is not reality, and how we should reject that type of a world. They will come up with their own morality to critique a past morality.
Well, I would just like to say, and this is just my thought, when you see like Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best and stuff like that, the little things that happened were like, they were like a little, just like the tiniest little ripple. They were like these huge waves that we've got going on today.
Yeah.
It was always it was always something that was humorous to everybody, right? I mean, when they told a joke, it was funny to everybody.
Yeah.
And every person that was sitting in front of that TV, whether they were almost age or they were the smallest
Yeah.
child, it was acceptable for them to see it.
Yeah.
Right? But nowadays, oh my gosh. And during any time of the day.
You can't even watch
I
commercials.
remember, okay, Sunday night, falling asleep to Bonanza,
Yeah.
because that was when I was laying there in bed, kind of falling off, right? But they would not allow Bonanza before whatever time because it had adult,
Yeah.
content.
Yeah.
Well, now
Bonanza.
you would look at Bonanza, you're going, what the
Yeah.
I mean, what was the big deal about it, right? So, but you see, in those days, it was considered to be a little on the risque
Yeah,
side,
yeah.
so that it would be more for, for a grown up to watch rather than a small child,
Right.
So, I just feel about the kids all the time, right? I feel about the kids all
So
the
that
time.
is
They're
that's
being
becoming more compelling in our day.
exposed to
Yeah.
so much garbage and
Yeah.
filth and ugliness and everything.
And how many people have we
Oh.
heard saying, "What kind of parent is letting?"
Would take their kid to a drag.
Well, that too.
Yeah.
But even just to have a cell phone,
Oh yeah.
you cannot give a
An
young
unmonitored cell phone.
Right.
Yes, exactly. No, I know.
Well, I think it all kind of boils down to, years ago, you had the Bible in school, you had prayer, you had all this expectation that church was a valuable part of society. And so
Yeah.
there was the authority of Scripture. And I think we've gotten rid of that. And so then it's like there really is no standard. And if you want to be a furry, who am I to tell you you can't do that? Or, I'm stepping on your rights to say
Yes.
that you can't do whatever you want to do as long as it doesn't encroach upon my space, So I think it all boils down to that, and just watching like some of the more liberal people that I know and how they kind of just go with the waves of whatever's being discussed about, oh no, we can't, take away their rights for this. That's not okay. But it's just because there's no standard anymore.
So that's a little bit of where I was saying that morality is always substituted with another morality. People have rights. Okay, do they have a right to dress like that? Okay, they have a personal right to dress like that. But do they have a right to do it in front of children and act and say provocative things? I mean, the Bible is very clear. It's covenantal in its construction. You train your children the way you want them to be. And if the evil people are training, then there's no morality. Or there's a new morality.
Jesus said it would be better for someone
Yes.
to have a millstone hung around their neck and thrown into the depths of the sea than to lead one of the little ones astray.
Luke 17.
Yep.
But I was reading, because it just throws into my mind, and I was reading 1 Timothy 3 or 2 Timothy 3, and then 2 Thessalonians 2, the great apostasy. Apostasy.
People falling away
People falling away
from the truth.
and the Lord
Being lovers of themselves. Haters of their parents. On and on and on. We think this.
With substituting morality, wouldn't it be true though that Christians also critique the morality of Christians in the past?
Yeah.
So like you mentioned the Puritans that came over and that was the most holy our country's ever been. But what they were, I guess, doing was they were putting the law of Deuteronomy into their constitution.
Yeah.
So I mean, they would say, yeah, let's stone adulterers or stone homosexuals. Where now we would,
Drown witches.
yeah, in our day we would say that. Well, would we still say that that's good and right to do? That's a Christian standard. It looks like, and even we would critique Puritans like Jonathan Edwards that might have had slaves and he might have had
biblical reason why, to do that. So I guess the question is why, or how do we interpret God's morality? He's given us His word, His law, but how do we know what's the right Christian morality even? And I guess this gets into the topic of theonomy and all of that, which I'm dipping my toes into. I don't know a lot about, but
Yeah, I'm going to have to let that question just sit there because it's excellent. Yeah.
Well, our Constitution states that our rights come from God. That's where we get our rights.
Yeah.
So our rights do not come from us. They come from God. Okay? And I truly believe that our entire culture has lost that idea. That has not been stressed, that has not been talked about, that has not been, so any right that you perceive as being, a right that you have, is it square with Him?
Right.
That's what you got to check on.
I've heard people say much of this could be solved if it would just teach civics again. Proper understanding of the laws of our land that already exist.
Yeah.
But our courts are so quickly changing laws and accommodating groups or interest groups. But yeah, there's going to have to be, back to your question, there's going to have to be some interpretation required from a lot of those Old Testament laws. We were here one time after hours bringing up some of the very strange passages in Deuteronomy that we don't even understand the context for why you would perform some of those functions. It's like, man, we need to study what was really going on in the Old Testament before we could even think to apply any principle or standard that they were trying to advocate. We don't conquer nations anymore and take their slaves. There's all kinds of passages that are very awkward from my untrained 21st century mind. It's like, why in the world would you try to adjudicate someone committing adultery in that way? What is going on? All right.
Okay, so when you look at the generation that's coming up, they're not being trained in the home. They're not being trained at school, because you were talking about them being taught civics and all that stuff. Forget that. That's out.
Yeah.
I know we had to take government and
Yep.
stuff like that when I was in high school, but that's not a requirement anymore. You don't have to take it, or it's not a required course to graduate, right? So that some people just sleep through the class, right? But anyway, there's no foundation. When there's no foundation, then the people are just going off on their own little,
It's kind of it's what happened in the book of Judges, and it's why the people said, give us a king, part of the reason why. And then, of course, from a cynical standpoint, because obviously God is right to say, basically, why would you want a king instead of me? But people had replaced him as the primary authority so that everyone was doing what was right in their own eyes. And when you replace God as the authority, there has to be something to fill the void, and the Israelites assumed it was a man that could be the king, and then they quickly were disappointed in that over and over again for the most part. And then we say King Jesus is all, because he is, but outside of him, any authority
Because
is
absolute power corrupts absolutely. He said
is
that.
going to be a disappointment when it comes to God's definition of righteous morality.
I think there's also maybe a problem with the modern evangelical church. Like, if they view that, Christ is only concerned about, like, his church, and that's his kingdom, and we're operating in that sphere alone. And I'll give you a case study. You've got transgender surgery in minors. And in Canada, if you're a parent, you say, no, I don't want my child to have that surgery. you could go to jail because they would affirm that that's good and that's right.
In the state
But
of
in
Washington,
Tennessee,
State of Washington.
yeah, okay. But in Tennessee, it's like, no, that's off the table. We're outlawing that. You're not doing that if you're a minor, right? So you kind of have to codify into law what you think is good and right. And it seems like the Christian needs to be operating in the sphere of government and law too. I just think there's a disconnect there.
A lot of it is that there's I think it's an IRS ruling, isn't it, that says the pastor can only speak like 5% of his sermon regarding politics or something like
No,
that. Or they lose their tax exempt status.
there was talk of that in the day, I think during the Clinton administration. And then, no, there's nothing that
Okay.
can't really.
So I think a lot of pastors are so afraid of doing it, they don't speak about politics at all, about telling the people, you should be involved in this. You should, run for school boards, run for city council, mayor, because a lot of the things, it's local things that where things are happening, and it isn't just the federal congressmen and senators and president that.
There has not been in the evangelical fundamentalist church an idea that we are supposed to disciple the nations because Jesus is coming back. So why waste all your time learning to go to law school, to be a politician when Jesus is coming back? So there's a lot the Christian church has hamstrung itself by thinking that we weren't going to be here, and it can only get worse. We can't really be ultimately salt and light anywhere. So
When he comes back, he'll fix it all anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I've got 2 sheets of little statements I got to cover here, and you guys have got good ideas. So I'm going to read some of these, and if it prompts a thought, you just say, "Hey, all right." The agenda of the immoral is to replace the good with power.
Sounds about right.
Morality has a calibration, which allows for certain values to define circumstances. For example, we would advocate for capital punishment, but you're not supposed to murder. So there has to be some distinction between why and when you would do that when the Bible says you shall not murder.
But it also says that the power of the government has been given the power of the sword.
Romans 13, yeah.
For that purpose.
But even in the Old Testament, if you murder, there's.
I know, but you have a whole sect of Christianity that says that capital punishment should be outlawed. So.
But you use the word calibrate.
Yeah.
For a true calibration, you got to have a standard.
That's
You
right.
can't calibrate off of something that's been calibrated before.
I like that. We all know.
Certified. Unless it's certified.
Certified and peer reviewed. Free speech, we all know you can't yell fire in a crowded movie house. But I just saw on the news today that the government of Brazil is taking away everyone's Telegram account. They're just wiping it out. They don't want people talking to each other on a format that they can't monitor. So it's like, yikes.
Who's doing this?
Brazil.
Oh.
Brazil.
Probably at the behest of the CPC or CCP, because the CCP has has put money in
Tentacles everywhere.
building ports in Brazil and
Yeah.
other South American countries, and so these countries owe the CCP big time.
No. A false morality will argue for certain virtues that they are in fact dangerous when they conflict with another moral virtue. This is the fine calibration argument. Some person says, you know, they'll say, you want to ban books. You want to censor people. It's like, okay, I think it's a virtue, or is it a virtue? I think it is a freedom, which is a good thing, to allow people to read whatever they want to read.
Except if they're in middle school.
That's
And
right.
they're reading pornographic
Exactly.
things.
But they will chide this value over this value as being more important. And so they're using a morality to say your morality is deficient. When I say, no, this is the more important facet of the argument. But they know how to talk virtuously, even as they argue for things that are immoral.
It's kind of like with abortion when they make their abortion arguments.
Yes. When the state decides by law that one virtue must be accepted over a contrary virtue, they are legislating morality. But I've grown up almost all my life saying, you can't legislate morality, but that's all they do, is they legislate morality. They tell the society what the moral good is. The moral good is what they advocate. So, when I went traveling through Europe and visited U.S. embassies, I saw more pride flags than American flags at U.S. embassies all over Europe. And that's communicating something. That's communicating a value. That's communicating a morality. That's what America stands for.
And also the penalty attached to that law if you break it. So like
Right.
if you're gonna rape somebody, it'd be what, you get years in prison now, but as opposed to maybe the death sentence that you would see in the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Although governments legislate morality, morality does not come from human governments. And I think some people think that that's where morality comes from, the Supreme Court. Whatever the Supreme Court says, that's the morality. I don't know how you argue someone who believes in that out of that, except for you've got to get down to the final philosophical category about where does your authority lie? Is it going to be on you? And the famous thing is, then you can't condemn Adolf Hitler because he did what his morality told him to do.
But even with the Supreme Court, you have.
And everyone gets mad about bringing up World War II and Adolf Hitler. You broke some law. But go ahead.
But for they'll say that they provide the morality until they make a decision that's against what they believe is the moral thing to do, and then they're going to say, "Oh, the Supreme Court shouldn't have done that."
Mm. Oh, when the Supreme Court argues against there?
Yes.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
right. Like it's fine as long as it's along with what they think, but then if it's against something they they just have too many conservative or too many liberal, whatever the case may be.
And that sort of comes back to the question about preachers preaching politics. Well, I don't know what party I actually want to advocate for anymore. What political party actually does represent a Christian worldview? Because all I see are people going to Washington and turning into fat cats, which I think is immoral. All right, America was founded upon reasons thought to be morally good, and sought to establish a government that would promote the good by acknowledging what was evil. So a lot of our founding fathers, they enumerated why they were breaking with England, because King George and his monarchy did all these things, and we think these things are wrong, and what we're going to do is better. A primary foundational principle for a good morality is rooted in the conviction that all men are made in the image of God. a primary foundational principle for a good morality is rooted in the conviction that all men are made in the image of God. This reference prevents false narratives to be imposed upon people or society, such as such societies that have caste systems, those who violate bodily autonomy, those who have personal convictions about their personal identity, protects people against libel, patent law infringement, criminal actions. It implements the golden rule. It implements the idea that no one has the right to do wrong. A virtuous morality should be a part of our children's training.
Absolutely, 100%.
I'm thankful for all those people who convert as adults and change their lives and figure things out, but they're being outnumbered by the people coming out of state-sponsored schools. False morality always seeks to change the nature of words, activities, and procedures. So certain procedures, certain groups use phrases such as gender-affirming care when they're actually doing something else.
Exactly.
Reproductive rights when they're actually doing something else. This is very Orwellian, doublespeak.
Yeah. No,
Social justice.
They get you on semantics, right?
Yeah. Birthing person. You know, you have to change the language to promote the new morality. Some matters are amoral. Drinking, dancing, tattoos, hairstyle. Unless you can prove that hairspray is actually damaging the environment.
They did, and they changed it without
POCs.
fluorocarbons now.
I know, but see, there is a moral duty that people not use hairspray because you are destroying the ozone layer and you are destroying the earth. And you know, you people with that type of attitude and those convictions that you have, you're destructive to society. Maybe you shouldn't be around here. You're actually, your group of people, you're keeping us from being the great society that we want to be.
You're worshiping something, right?
Yeah.
Either you worship God or you worship Mother Earth, or you worship yourself, or you whatever. But you are putting something else in God's rightful place in your life.
Idolatry,
right?
yeah. But that's the same things they said when they loaded up the trains. We'd actually be a greater society if you people weren't here. And that argument's going to get used. It gets used everywhere. There's always some group finds someone to be the scapegoat. And then they have a moral conviction that they believe to be good to eliminate them. But if all men are created in the image of God, that sort of makes it harder to do that.
They don't like hearing it, so they just get angry.
You know. A freedom or a want is not a right. This shouldn't be controversial, right? As soon as relativism becomes a way of defining morality, which is the goal of the relativist, then the standard of total truth can be rejected. I have to think more about why I wrote that. Christianity claims total truth over all facets of life: history, science, nature, government, religion, human identity. What an oppressive religion. It claims everything. It wants to have control over everything. That's why it's a danger, right? It engages in the project of ethical evaluations, determining the moral good when encountering unique situations. So this one was sort of promulgated because of what doctors are able to do for couples that are infertile. And there's like genetic ethicists who like try to figure out what is the moral good in these circumstances. Should we because we can? Or are there other principles that we're violating by engaging in certain activities that cost millions of dollars, and don't guarantee success? There's a lot of discussion in the scientific realm, medical realm, technological realm. And are there any other ethicists out there who are actually trying to determine what the moral good would be with these new frontiers? Or do we just plow ahead and say, science?
Say something here?
Oh, yeah.
Or you just pray and God sends you Rochelle.
Oh, okay. A proper morality must be founded upon principles that structure convictions. I don't know if that was doublespeak or not. Conscience, convictions, authority are all malleable if not founded upon a reality that is not eternally true. The notions of justice, rights, truth, fairness, etc. must be measured against transcendent principles that derive from our relationship to the morally good God. So that's where it comes back to the inalienable rights. But that's the project that those who don't like Christian morality, that's the big fight. We say that our morality is rooted in eternal principles based upon a character of an eternal God who gets to determine what's right and what's wrong. And they just say, I don't believe in God. Well, you do believe in some God. You've made something your God. You're still religious. They like the fifth, and they say, that's religion. I'm sorry. Show me your foundational principles, and I'll show you your God.
Worship.
Yeah, very good. All right. Moral laws exist and cannot be violated in a society for more than a few generations. I think that was your judge's comment, hon. There's only so long that people can
Maintain.
flaunt all the standards. They don't exist. I watched a really interesting NOVA program about the Mesoamerican Indians, the Aztecs, Incas, and most of them were wiped out because of multiple years of drought. They just couldn't live there anymore. And they killed enough people to appease the gods that kind of thinned them out. And they have found civilizations where like 60,000 people and like multiple replications with LiDAR, spectrometry, going over the jungles, they could find where these huge, giant cities were. But they were technologically advanced and they were self-sustaining. But 7 years of drought and throwing too many virgins into the volcano doesn't solve. Yeah.
Okay, so when we were there, because we went to, which one was it?
On the Riviera Maya.
Yeah.
And so we went to we were on the Yucatan Peninsula.
Yeah. So it was your highest goal in those, whether those highlight games or wherever they do.
Oh, yeah.
To leave it all on the field, meaning you wanted to win because then you would be sacrificed.
Oh, goodness.
Okay. It was to lose was the shame of you didn't get sacrificed.
Living with your loss.
Right?
Yeah.
Even
Oh,
though
wow.
you lived, you weren't going to be sacrificed. The other thing is, of course, throwing their children into the cenote, right?
Yeah.
To that was their highest form of reverence to their deities, right?
Yeah.
Is to sacrifice, like the Moloch and all
Yeah.
that stuff. So my most precious thing is my child. So I'm gonna
If you were on the losing team, you could not get married.
Oh.
The your potential bride's family wouldn't have anything to do with you, wouldn't allow you to marry their daughter.
Genetics.
And so, you just became basically an outcast
Wow.
entirely. You just lost all status of any sort.
So it's like, where do those morality codes come from? How do people come up with these? But they've pretty much ensured that they're not going to be there for a while. I mean, how many civilizations have we uncovered and we've said, wow, look what they did. Where'd they all go? Well, they didn't have any lasting morality that could sustain them. They could be technologically advanced.
He made the comment.
Yeah.
So we're technologically advanced, we're all these things, but we either murder our children before they're born, or we render them sterile so that they can't reproduce,
Yeah.
right? So what are we doing?
Yeah. Well, you have to be a group of people who are the light on the hill, salt of the earth. I don't want to talk about what do they call alternate societies now? Or what do they call it? People who say, hey, we just have to start our own economic system, our own banking. We have to basically be Mennonites, Amish. You just have your alternative society and you just do it that way. You just separate from the world until I guess they shoot you. I mean, the bad guys have got guns. Laws are written by a person. Laws are written by a person or being. Therefore, not acknowledging the will of that being is rebellion. And I'm going back to Romans saying God writes laws on our hearts. And laws don't evolve. They come from a personal being who can say he's being personally offended if we don't acknowledge his laws. To live as though there is no lawgiver is simple to install oneself as the ultimate authority. Yeah, basically you replace God, you become God. The current moral philosophy does not appeal to logic or to science any longer. Therefore, it is a religion and must be separated from the promotion by the state. Everyone talks about separation of church and state. The type of things that people believe now about themselves is not science. It's not logic. It's not philosophy. It's just, I think I'm this now, and you better accept it as such. And I'm saying that is the worst form of religion. You just believe it, so that's the way it is. Why is the state endorsing that? It has to separate itself from religion.
We've turned that statement into something that it isn't.
Yeah.
Okay? Because when that was set up, it was set up as, we're not going to make a state church.
Yes, exactly.
Right? And we're not saying that you shouldn't be going to church, and we're not saying that church should not have a part in the society or, how our society is functioning, but we don't want one particular church to be in charge of the whole thing. But we have turned that around to say, we don't want church to be any part of what's going on.
Establishmentarianism.
Right.
We weren't going to establish a single religion over all the people. The state legislates morality and will be held accountable to the ultimate lawgiver and authority on morality. And this is my favorite question. All this to get to my favorite question. When you're talking to someone about matters of morality, you ask them this: based upon which moral principle do you justify X? Based upon what moral principle do you justify dressing like a woman? It's not a moral principle. Is it immoral if I don't accept you? Yes. So give me the moral principle for why you get to dress like a woman when you're actually a man. trans women are women, trans women are women. That's what you get. People screaming at you.
They don't
Well,
care,
that's
it's
because
just
they
what
don't-
feel.
There's
They don't have a foundational leg to stand on. So when you called them out on that point, then they just get angry at you.
well, this will get me a strike on YouTube. But I want to be Christian and say people are lost. I was lost. I believe things that were wrong. People prayed for me. We need to pray for them. But in the meantime, the code of conduct for my culture is eroding. And I'm fighting with my own children who ask me embarrassing questions about why people are the way they are in this world that they see, that they hear about. It takes a lot of work to raise kids to love Christ and his gospel and his kingdom, and not to see it just as an escape hatch, to actually see it as a calling in our lives. So I can't shout, round squares are squares, round squares are squares. It just doesn't make any sense.
But that's your truth. And that's what I
Okay.
in community Bible study this morning, the core leader of my men's group sang a little song. Unfortunately, I can't remember what the song was.
Thank you.
And he said, yes. And he says, that was in 1950.
Yeah.
This song came out about how...
Mr. Rogers' song.
no, I don't think it was. But it says, and I think it says, but what we need is Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
Is
Okay.
one of the lines, or something very similar to that. And he says because this country's going down the tubes or something,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
and something. But anyway, in 1970, the rock opera Jesus Christ Superstar came out, and there was one line in there. There was a few lines in there where Jesus is in front of Pilate. Pilate's going, but what is truth? We both have truths. Our mine is yours. And it was creeping into the culture there. So we
Yeah.
all had our own truths. And as long as it was true for you, it was starting to come in even at that point in time and before. But that line kind of, okay, somebody has acknowledged that that's what's happening.
Yeah.
At least in 1970, the writers of the songs there in that, were consciously or not, were acknowledging that was what was happening.
Everyone on the side of truth follows Jesus.
But you see, we both have truths.
Well-
And so that's what it became. It became like, well, my truth is different than your truth. So you just go on believing that. I've got my own.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening. Now we've got millions of different truths out there.
Yeah, but there's only one truth teller that backed up his truth with the ultimate claim.
Oh, I believe.
Yeah.
I believe that. But I mean,
know.
that's what's happening
I know.
in our culture
Yeah.
right now. Got millions of truths.
Well, I just had a bunch of random thoughts about morality, and I think the church needs to hear it preached in a proper way. You guys have brought up some excellent points. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, if I'm going to chuck it. It's easier to preach the Bible, but sometimes I think the Bible gives us a format to address some of these matters. So you can pray for me.
Ultimately, it is really important to preach the Bible because even when we do these evangelical surveys in America, the concept of different truths is prevalent. I mean, most Americans who consider themselves Christians would not stand on the side of there is only one truth. It's just how it is.
And wouldn't believe
that's
Jesus is the only
partly
way.
Because
Right.
although they identify as Christians, they are not being disciples of the Word. They are not being discipled in the Word. And if you don't know the Word, then it's really hard to feel like there is a truth with a capital T.
So you made me think about that really sweet couple that started attending here during COVID. And then we both found out we believe differently on a very important matter, a moral issue. And they said, we can't come here anymore. And of course, no one here chased anyone away. But our conviction was, no, that's that's an unacceptable lifestyle. You will not hear that promoted from the pulpit. Probably no one from the church, but that became a deciding factor where they were going to go to church. So there has to be, I think there's going to be a little bit of a, you get to the faithful and then who really understand what it's about, and then they live it out and it bounces back again. Just, it depends on how far it bounces back out, because you get the serious ones who train their children right, and hopefully they marry people who also are serious. We're going to see a spring back a little bit somewhere, just sociologically it's going to happen. But it's going to be a wonder to see what kind of resistance they run into. And so that's why we need to be praying. And evangelizing and confessing our sins, repenting. Preach the word in season, out of season. Lord, pray that you'd direct your church to embrace your truth, to love it. We pray that you'd speak to our hearts and minds, prepare us for this Lord's Day, to present something that equips your people to love your kingdom and your call upon their lives. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.